What is popping, King? What is good?
Was good.
What's
Back to the grind cup because it's been a minute since we've been able to connect with the free folk like this.
Chop it up in this way, right? I know already got my my New York coffee on deck.
Got to. How's the Sunday going so far?
The Sunday it's feeling good. It kind of just started on my end. I didn't wake up not too long ago. What's up, Vizio? What's up, Tavares? How you doing, bro?
Hey, got some squad showing up already.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Today's been going by pretty smooth so far. No complaints on my end. Had some good breakfast. I got the coffee going. What's up, Mickey Lake? How's the Sunday going on your end?
It's been good, man. I just took a nice walk this morning. It's starting to get a little frigid out here in suburban Massachusetts, but I'm about to be switching up the surroundings hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So,
What are you thinking about switching it up to?
Oh, they'll see when they see it in the background.
Yeah, that's a clean hat too. Let me see that.
Hey, oh yeah, you've seen the white one, but not the.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Already. I got some merch on too. I think we got some 1-on-1s right now.
We do. Have some
we gotta connect, bro. We gotta connect and make something happen, boss.
Yeah, we need those official.
Oh, D. But shout outs to also Tariq who created the song for us. We're about to get started soon. I'm gonna give it like 30 more seconds and we can get rocking right in there.
Smooth.
Let me adjust some side. He said I need that joint. Hell yeah.
Let's cut.
Let's get it going. I am with it. But yeah, shout outs to Tariq Smith also too. I don't know if y'all can hear the theme music in the background. My good friend Tariq Smith, known him since high school, and he's always just been producing beats, and he passed this one to us, and I think it's pretty thematic. A little smooth, you feel me?
Future guest right there.
Oh yeah, no, definitely a future guest right there. All right, but I'm done to get it kicking because I know we only have about an hour in this thing, and I know sometimes you and I like to keep it going, so you never know where it ends up. So I definitely want to make sure we can at least wrap up some elements of the conversation.
All right, smooth. Yeah, I'm ready to jump right in, man.
All right, perfect.
Lots been going on this week, so there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and it's like when all this stuff happens on a week-to-week basis, it's like these weeks go by fast, but the days go by slow. If that makes sense too, you feel me? With how much actually happens.
Yeah, and I feel like the this is obviously the first episode of this new series that we're doing. Yeah. I feel like we're really gonna feel that now on this, having this like every Sunday. Mm-hmm. I feel like we're gonna blink and feel like, oh, we're back in another conversation, chopping it up about what
exactly. So thank you guys for joining. We definitely want to utilize this as a space where we can all just chat about what's happening in the world. We realize that with a lot of media outlets that are out there in the world, everyone has somewhat of a specific agenda. Here with You Think and everything that we're doing with You Free, Aazim and I, we're not trying to control the narrative. We want to free the narrative. So we definitely want to make sure that you guys also have the opportunity to participate, leave some comments below, join the conversation at any given point. And we're going to be doing this every single Sunday at noon. Backgrounds may be different depending on where we are in the world, which is also a beautiful thing. Let's get it rocking. What's been on your mind this week?
All right, so my topic for the week, and I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of trying to string together a few different topics into this one narrative. Mm-hmm. But I've really just been thinking about sort of what politics kind of looks like today, and how in some ways it's a continuation of what politics has always been, but then in other ways, it's sort of this post-internet or even post-Trump political world, which is not necessarily the same as what we've seen before. So with that in mind, a couple of things came up this week that I think speak to that. The first being the new Borat movie came out. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I didn't get a chance to peep it yet. No.
But the sort of the viral moment from the movie is Rudy Giuliani, who obviously is close circle of the president, former mayor of New York, etc., etc. So very big political figure.
Was the way he played like a major role in them? Like, what was the role that he played in the movie, or was it just like a quick cameo?
I mean, it was a quick cameo, but at the same time, the way it's framed in the movie kind of like builds up to it. But essentially, what happened is like in the movie, Borat has his daughter, who is in the movie she's 15, but like it's played by a 24-year-old actress, and like some people have been trying to spin into like Rudy Giuliani knew that he was gonna go get into the situation with a 15-year-old, which isn't quite the case. But basically what happens is she's like posing as a journalist and like is in his hotel room, and like one thing like sort of like leads to another, and and he's the moment that Borat comes like jumping into the room, he's literally undoing his belt, like trying to get it popping. He said he was tucking his shirt back in, but I think if you watch the movie, see how he's leaning back and everything, you're like, yeah, you know what's good. But yeah, like a situation like that, I mean, we know that our politicians, a lot of them, have been caught out here doing like freaky things, you know what I'm saying? Just like having wild sex lives or inappropriate sex lives, things that you wouldn't necessarily want to see a public figure representing the people get caught up in.
And have that be public facing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in a situation like this, it's like that kind of happened, but at the same time, it's like in the context of Borat and like this like hidden camera in the hotel room and whatnot. So, that's just like in one example of like the old political reality is now getting shown in a new light, in the modern context. And then a completely flip on that example is AOC going live on Twitch to get young voters to vote and playing a game of Among Us and getting, breaking streaming record numbers of like 400,000, viewers on that.
She was like, sure, her Twitch viewership was like number 2. I think number 1 was Drake and Ninja. Back then when Fortnite was like the topic of the conversation of no matter where you ended up going.
Yeah. I mean,
that's wild numbers to do.
Clearly an effective tactic, right? And I feel like the public sentiment was like, oh, it's great to see politicians like actually connecting with people and like, like being honest with people and authentic. So in some ways that's also this new reality, but then it's also like, that's really just the modern spin of, when celebrities would go on like the late night shows and the talk shows and whatnot.
TRL and stuff like that.
Let the guard down that way. So it's like all of this is still to a certain extent just like marketing and like public relations. But it's interesting to see that like the political game kind of continuing in the way that it has been going, but at the same time adapting to the modern world in that way.
Because a lot of it too, I feel like it's like you kind of have to meet the people where they're at. You know what I mean? So if it's like they're on Twitch watching and that you can get a huge viewership from that, and being able to actually get those numbers, not really depend on these news outlets or other media outlets to actually show you how many people you're watching. You can look in the corner and see like, all right, I have this many eyeballs in front of me. That's a powerful thing. Also, too, on that note, I know the Biden-Harris campaign, they also had like some of their campaigning materials in the game Animal Crossing as well, which is another place where they're like meeting people. So it brings the world. I feel like it's authentic in a way where they're trying to get a certain demographic of people on board. So they're really intentional about who they're like, quote unquote, advertising to. But it makes it a little bit weird and interesting where it's like, especially if they're younger kids who aren't politically involved. Everyone should be politically aware, 1,050%. Oh, what's up, Tabra? What's good? What's good? But to a certain degree, it's like, is this just the reality now, or do you feel like that's even appropriate for them to be able to like even utilize tech in that way to sort of have that presence? Because then on the other hand, like if it was Trump and Pence doing the same thing, you know what I mean? Would people then push forward for the video game company to then shut down that political influence in it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like to me, what's interesting about politics in the context of the internet is like in general, the internet just like knows how to like. Well, I'm gonna frame this kind of strangely because it's like on one hand, I'd say the internet knows how to smell out bullshit, which kind of sounds like not true in the case of like propaganda influencing elections and things like that.
People take people's pictures, put a random quote, and they.
So clearly that's not the right way of putting that thought. But at the same time, like if it's like it's like when the Democrats like wore the cloth and like did the kneeling, and everyone was like, "Yo, we know this is bullshit." Like,
Yeah,
just like, so, like from that, like when political campaigns look to adapt and move into these spaces and things like that to meet different people, if it's not done in a way that, like, even if it's, you don't have to fake the funk and be like, oh, like, you know, for instance, AOC, like, she doesn't have to be like, I'm out here playing Among Us every night, like, you know, like,
yeah, because they're right here.
she just has to be like, oh, like, I understand that this is something that people really like. It seems like cool. I'm going to tap into it. And I think there's authenticity in approaching a new medium or like a new audience in that manner, that, you know, if you don't have that, then that audience is always going to be like, nah, this is bullshit. Like,
No, in time. No, that's real. But then also too, on that note too, if we bring it back to like awareness, politics as usual, I actually like that. I like that topic title. I was actually listening to some Hove yesterday. I listen to Hove every day actually. So
I mean,
it's nothing new, right? Also too, it was like we had the presidential debate. What was it, on Tuesday or Wednesday? And I feel like the way, even like on social media, people were building up to be like, okay, we're probably going to get another repeat of the first one, in which President Trump was just being extremely disruptive, or people were sort of building it up in this way where they weren't expecting the debate to actually have some semblance of what it was before. You know, so that was also another reality shock as well. Why do you think it went that way this time? No, and were they also muting? Do you know if they were muting?
I was about to say, full disclaimer, I did not watch it this most recent debate. I didn't really see what there would be for me to gain out of that personally. You know, like my vote, I'm not an undecided voter in this current election. So yeah, I didn't even tune into it. So how would you say it was different?
They were just giving each other the opportunity to speak. It seemed more like they were politicians more so than just individuals speaking their mind is just trying to get a point across. And I don't know if it was a situation where there was just this realization for the current administration, like, hey, the world is watching, you know, and like being able to actually see what the rest of the world was saying about that first initial one. That could have played definitely a role in the way people were moving. But yeah, no, it was just it was interesting because I felt like if the first one went this way, people would have been a little bit more focused. But also too, it's like whatever they're discussing, I feel like people are already, there's nothing that can bring you. I feel like even for people like who are undecided, I don't know if like the debates are the things that can bring them across the board to like fully support a candidate or not.
Yeah, I mean, I do find it kind of wild at this point that there are undecided voters in theory, but then I think it's really people who are decided but are either like looking for an out or looking for some sort of confirmation, like maybe a subsection of people who know that it's not socially appropriate to vote for Trump, but at the same time they like want to vote for Trump, or like people who, you know, have never voted Democrat and like for the first time they're considering it for Biden. Like I feel like it's those like, you know, outlier people they're trying to speak to, but at the same time, like actually, first off, time out, just shouts out to Alayon.
Yo, shouts out to Al.
Hearts back. But yeah, at the same time, it's like it is all political strategy, and you know, the context for the second debate is not the same as the first debate, and so Trump isn't necessarily going to, and Biden isn't necessarily going to play it the exact same way. And I mean, you know, as much as or in all the areas that Trump has clearly not been effective at doing what he set out to do, politics is obviously not one of them. Like he set out to become president. No, everyone thought it was impossible, probably including him, but he still was able to do that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like he, like clearly clearly if he changed his strategy for the second debate, it was an informed decision based on people who have experience in this and have had success in doing this, you know? So, so yeah, I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, it's all just like strategy and like, you know, I mean, the NFL is going on. Politics is just another sport like that. It's like week by week, you got a game plan.
How do you feel about sort of people now? You know how there was this whole saying like, oh, you got to keep church and state separate, or even like when you're in school, you sort of keep different things about your religious beliefs separate. And at a time too, like politics wasn't something that was at the forefront or being pushed forward as part of people's identity. How do you feel about that now being a thing where people are discussing this in the workplace, on social networking sites like LinkedIn, you know, or you have individuals sort of taking a stand where they're saying vote, but I feel like when people are saying vote, there's a way in which they're trying to let you know, like, hey, when we're telling you to vote, we really mean vote for this party as opposed to that party, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. Obviously, there's like a lot of things that have happened, but at the same time, like as you were saying that, I was just having flashbacks to like second grade with my hand over my heart, going, "I pledge allegiance to the flag." You know what I'm saying? Like, so I feel like politics is always. There's just been certain outs, like even before. I mean, obviously, we were really young before 9/11, but even before that, that was one event which like made people realize, like, oh, like normal isn't really normal, and like there's other factors at play here. Trump winning again, it's like you have to sort of. I know there's a subsection of people who are politically active and choosing not to vote. So I'm not necessarily talking about them in general, but just you have to be politically active. You have to be aware of what's going on in society, because what's going on in society affects you. And it's like we've come to lulls as a nation where we sort of forget that, but then every time we forget it, chickens come home to roost, and we ultimately like are forced back into a situation where we have to deal with that.
No, that's real. It's fun that you bring up the Pledge of Allegiance. I remember in 7th grade, my teacher, she was Canadian, and we had to say the Pledge of Allegiance in the beginning of class. And when I didn't realize why she wasn't saying it, there was like this breakthrough in reality where I started listening. Well, she didn't say it because she's Canadian, so it's like, what is she pledging allegiance to our flag for? She had her little Canadian flag, and we always wanted her to say the Canadian Pledge of Allegiance.
Y'all didn't do Canada?
Right? But then, like, when I saw, I realized, okay, she's not saying the Pledge of Allegiance because she's from a different country, and I just took a step back and began listening to all the words. There were actually 2 or 3 kids where we went up to her and said, like, hey, like, what if we just, like, we still stand up with everyone, but what if we don't say anything? Is that okay? She was like, well, as in, like, I'm not here to tell you guys what to and to not do. This is just part of, like, the scheduled programming, you know what I mean? The scheduled programming that we have for the school day. So she kind of just gave, that was, like, the first bit of, not freedom in a sense. Actually, it was freedom. It was just the ability to make choices on our own at such a young age. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good response for her to have. I feel like there's other teachers would be like, "Excuse me."
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Instead of checking in a way where we're gonna start feeling awkward about ourselves, even though we're just asking the questions as a kid.
Yeah. Now you got to have that freedom to explore different ways of reality, different ways of approaching reality. One last sort of thing that I'll bring into this politics as usual conversation. So, as I mentioned, I'm in Massachusetts, and on the election or on the ballot for this election, there's 2 questions, and the second question is essentially about changing the way that ballots are run, so that I'm going to do my best to sort of explain it, because like all these questions always are framed and really.
Well, people have to still do their own research. Remember, we're not here to control the narrative; we're here to free the narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was a bar, by the way. I didn't know you were coming equipped with that.
I mean, it's just it just happens. It happens. You're an artist yourself. You know the way it goes.
Of course. But yeah, no. So question 2 in Massachusetts is about changing the way that ballots are run, essentially, or elections are run, so that, say there's 5 candidates, and if no candidate receives, so essentially when you vote, instead of just voting for which one you want to win, you'd be ranking them, and then if no one gets above 50% of the vote in like the first round, and whoever has the least amount of votes, those votes are then go to the next person on that, so if they were number 1, then number 2, and pass that along, until someone accumulates the 50% threshold. So basically, essentially, like, you can't necessarily have someone win 40% to 37% to 23%, which would be the leftover. Like, you would have to then split up that 23%, be like, okay, you guys, like, your candidate came in last, but who's your second choice? And then your votes go to that person. And I think Maine is the first state to have done it. So now Massachusetts and I believe Alaska have it on the ballot for this year. But that was an interesting one. And to be honest, like, I wasn't aware. I found out about it by opening up the ballot, and I was like, oh, let me think about this and sort of research into it. But I thought that was an interesting sort of approach of, especially in how divisive politics is today, basically saying you can't just appeal to your base. You have to actually do something to try to appeal to other folks,
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be curious, I guess, just your thoughts on that framework of elections moving forward.
So just so I'm getting it right, it's like you don't necessarily have to make the choice. You're sort of ranking the people you'd want in office.
Yeah, so if there's it's like in this election, there's Trump, there's Biden, there's Independents, and there's the Green Party, I believe. There's like four main ones. So basically, you would rank it, and then obviously Trump and Biden are going to be the ones who receive the majority of the votes. So the other two candidates, people who voted for them, ultimately their votes would then go to either Trump or Biden based on how they rank those candidates in comparison to everyone else. Unless in the first round someone gets over 50%. So if you already have more than 50% of all votes going for you, then all right, obviously the ranking doesn't really matter at that point.
Yeah, I didn't even. Mike said, "I think you." Merch coming soon, boss. Merch coming soon. What do I think about it? I honestly don't have any thoughts about it because I feel like it's still. I feel like that gives people the feeling that they have more choices and more options because of this ranking system, but it's still just a situation where it's like we still have people in our minds that we would have wished to be on these political tickets regardless of the fact. You know what I mean? So I feel like, albeit that's a nice way to give people a feeling of choice, or even as they're going about ranking, possibly making it a little bit fairer on who gets pushed forward. I still just feel like things still need to change on a fundamental level. Being able to even be allowed into, for example, like the DNC, like to be able to even get on that debate stage. There's just so many of these different requirements. I feel like those barriers need to just knock down at first before we start playing games with the ballot in that way.
See, I agree with you. There. See, that's like where I run into trouble.
I feel like it's just another like element of just like symbolism in one way or the other. You know what I mean?
No, I mean I do think it has an impact. I think I would agree though that it's like nowhere near the impact that we would want to see. And this is sort of where I run into the my headaches with the political sphere is definitely, to your point, this isn't necessarily the thing that needs to change the most, but it's also the only one that's on the ballot this time. So it's in terms of, a lot of times, I'm basically, I guess what I'm saying is I'm very against incrementalism. And to me, something like this is sort of an incremental change and let's rethink how we actually do elections. It's a very small step in that direction. So it's on one hand, yes, I personally would be for, rethinking how we do elections. But at the same time, to your point, it's you're not necessarily seeing the actual things that are going to impact long-term and lasting change on the ballot, So that's the trouble that I run into a lot of times is this incremental way that our current system is set up, and the fact that we want to change the current system, it just doesn't necessarily lend itself to as quick a change as I feel like the country needs a lot of the time in terms of the things that are impacting people.
Yep.
So.
It's interesting too because a lot of people from our household, they went to go vote early yesterday, and there were just long lines for some of the polling places, 3 or 4 blocks long, and it took them an hour and a half to even get to the front door. But it's still all of this happening during an early voting stage. So it's you can look at it as one of two things. It's still those elements of voter suppression, or it's hey, there's just a lot of people actually wanting to cast their vote early, so that's why it's taking a longer time. I'm curious to see by 2024 or even 2028. I mean, 2024 may be a little bit too soon, but I'm still extremely optimistic about how fast change can actually happen. But we just need to just implement just other ways to get that vote across. It's election day is still not a federal national holiday all across the board. People still have to go into work regardless still, So it's albeit people could vote early, I just feel there's just still things that are happening where it's we'll give you a little bit of this, but you still have to take this from us as well.
Yeah. I mean, we have to think about these things in a manner that's not just informed by what the current system is, but also just we really do. I mean, obviously I use this framework a lot with the whole what it is, what it can be, should be, will be. But I think that is the issue is we have to really not just get caught up in what it is and really think about what it can should and can and should be. Otherwise, we just, we like a failure of imagination is one surefire way to make the issues that are currently in society continue to exist in society, because you're just like, if you don't think high enough or think outside the box enough, then you just end up still inside the box, Yeah,
and it's like we also have to move and change with the times. I feel like, especially within the political realm, it's like things are just so antiquated because that's how things have always been run. But it's like everyone has, or not, I can't say everyone, but there's way more people with technology in the palm of their hands than there were ever before. You know what I'm saying? Or even the fact that when you turn 18, why aren't you automatically registered to vote? Why is it that extra step that you then have to go through? I find it the same way, like similar with taxes. It's like they're taking out taxes already before I even get my check, but then I have to file in order for you to tell me if did I guess right? You know what I mean? Or did I file right? Even though you already have the answer, but then if I file it wrong, I'm at fault, even though you have the answers already. You know what I'm saying?
Man, America.
We need some shifts. We need some shifts. And the thing about it, I wouldn't even say it's just like an American thing. I feel all across the world, things like this are happening where it's like we're not utilizing this tech in order to make things more efficient for our day-to-day.
That's real. I don't know what media and awareness refers to, but I have a feeling that's going to be a good segue into what you've been thinking.
Yeah, so, okay, where? Yeah, no, so when I was thinking about media and awareness, I was thinking about how best people are. So, for example, there was the hashtag #EndSARS that was going across social media, and SARS is the Special Anti-Robbery Squad in Nigeria, and apparently that they were just they're killing innocent protesters. They're killing and attacking a certain demographic in the country, and it's police brutality. But it made me take a step back and think that police brutality is not just a race issue. You know what I'm saying? Like, police brutality just has a lot just to do with controlling the masses, and whenever people are utilizing their right to speak up, they're chastised, and then in this point, being killed. And I was coming from a place where I felt at times where we're bringing all this awareness to certain issues, but then what ends up happening, whenever we decide to share one of these stories, utilize these hashtags, it's bringing awareness and is it working? And I had to pause and reflect on why I was feeling like some of these things may have not worked, you know what I'm saying, or weren't working at the time. But then I'm starting to think like, hey, I'm now aware of what's going on because of all these hashtags. And that's exactly what part of that element is to do, just to make us aware. But then on another note too, we've also seen it here in America whenever, it was happening even this summer, where you have people who are protesting, utilizing media in order to coordinate. And at times, whenever protesters and stuff would get there, you already have like officers that are already there. You know what I mean? And the officers who aren't there to sort of promote a peaceful protest, officers that are there at times to agitate. And it even gets down to the point where they have also utilized social media to sort of pinpoint protesters out there because they saw them at certain gatherings and stuff. So it's like this fine balance to be able to utilize social media to. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background. It's like this fine balance, not even using social media, but just media in general to, of course, spread awareness, but it can also be utilized against individuals because it can then start creating this narrative about your role in that protest or what was happening that day.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, that's definitely the fine balance that I feel like we've talked about in a lot of contexts, where it's like, technology being able to help, but at the same time being a hindrance in other ways, and like having both positive and negative effects. And that's definitely a big example of that. I think there's a few sort of thoughts that came to mind while you were talking. First off, I'd say as far as the idea of police brutality, or just like the police being used as a tool of oppression, and how that's not necessarily a racial thing, and it's an international issue. I would agree, but I'd also say, first off, I would it's an international issue, but I also think, the reason why we think about it racialized is because in America, the way that American history is, like, it's just so intertwined into that. So that's part of it. But then I feel like as far as like the technology aspect of stuff, damn, I had a thought and I feel like it just slipped
No,
away.
that's okay. I'm gonna let you catch it. So it was, I think you were going off the fact that with police brutality, if we look at it from a global scale compared to what's happening in America or even in some European countries as well. Like even when I went to Denmark, I can see the way the police are moving with people who weren't white, you know what I mean, or white passing out there, or even me being American, I wasn't targeted in a certain way that I would be in America, you know, but it's still
Yeah,
down to that policing all across the globe is still for the element of control. And it's not even like it's it's like if we think about the army is to protect the country, you know what I mean, protect your resources and go out there to fight wars against other armies. But policing, it's supposed to be able to like, how best can we make sure that everyone in the community is safe? You know what I mean? It's like we have the army to protect outside the borders, and the police officers are supposed to protect us here. But it's like whenever that's not being held true, and we realize that it's happening in a country where people they there's a lot of commonalities, whether it's like certain languages that are spoken, certain dialects, tribes, and even skin tones. It's like if we still see that those forms of repression happening, it's definitely a global conversation. It's a global pandemic in itself. You know what I'm saying?
definitely. Well, I also think so. That reminded me of what I was going to say before, which is that another big difference between America and a lot of these other countries is really just scale and like how huge America is, how much like how both geographically as well as the population of America, like how huge it is compared to other countries, as well as the fact that it's really so split up into these different, to these 50 different states. And I mean, obviously to that latter part, like I can't speak necessarily to how some of these other countries, like what their smaller territories inside are necessarily are like, but I just say clearly, even from the pandemic response, like the COVID response, we can see how different things are in each state. And so with that in mind, I think that as far as technology and fighting back against these issues, that's why like sometimes I wonder what the logistical limitations come from. And for instance, like I remember over the summer people were pointing to like tactics in Hong Kong and being like, this is how you need to move in America. But it's also like, well, what does that really mean? Because if you think about how big Hong Kong is, and like both again geographically and population, and you're saying,
even the way that they're going about utilizing tech to watch people and just
yeah, it's just a different context. And so with that in mind, with America, it's like I don't know what that necessarily looks like on like a mass scale of organizing, especially considering that to really organize effectively in terms of some of the areas that we're talking about, you don't necessarily, like to your point, you don't want to be on technology like that. So it's like ultimately I feel like if we're really starting to think about, like the types of revolutions that you see in other countries as far as, like the people organizing against the police state, yeah, I don't know what that would necessarily look like in America, because I feel like ultimately it would manifest itself in different clusters, in different, cities or in different states or what have you, as opposed to being, when we point to some other countries and being like, oh, like that. And obviously, again, like that still would happen in one collective spot, but it wouldn't be just so, yeah, like it's just such a difference of scale that I feel like there's a lot of comparisons to be made about how these things play out in America, but at the same time, there's a lot of differences that make it hard to really apply what we're seeing elsewhere to how things will manifest out here. But ultimately, it is all like tied to the same issues of oppression that everyone is, or that people across the world are pushing back against.
Entirely. It's like going back to the note of awareness. Even Joe Biden, he was speaking about what was happening out in Nigeria, you know what I mean, because of the fact that media was able to allow him to be aware of the police brutality. But it's like, I'm so curious to see if like politicians or leaders, the way that I just hope that there's people are just keeping the same energy, you know what I mean, being consistent across the board. We see happening from a lot of our leaders who are also who've been speaking up the past XYZ amount of years and speaking up this summer, and also speaking up what's happening in Nigeria, because they realize that this is a global issue as it pertains to police brutality. But people who are sort of playing this political game, I'm curious to see if they're gonna look at these countries who are dealing with similar things that we're dealing here in America and sort of framing theirs as more extreme or worse than what's happening here. You know, that's where it can get a little bit clouded and muddy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. My expectation in terms of how most politics talk about stuff versus like what that's actually going to look like is typically just y'all just talking to fill the air and to try to get votes. Anything people say, anything people say in the 6 months pre-election, like you just trying to get votes, my guy. Like,
Yeah, no, I feel like things aren't. Yeah, people aren't. I mean, there's some people who've been consistent across the board.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm curious to see now that there were certain narratives that were being pushed when people were deciding who the Democratic nominee should be, and there was a certain narrative that, oh, this person has a better chance at beating this person, so on and so forth. So I'm curious to see if there's just been these realizations or awakenings in people's minds where, yeah, what's good, bro? People's realizations and awakenings in their mind that you gotta just have to just be faithful and confident on who you want to be your leader at the end of the day. You know what I mean? It's like blocking out the noise. That's what I'm saying. It's like media and awareness. I feel like there was even a campaign in that way where it was like sort of drilling these ideas in our mind that, hey, this candidate may not be able to defeat this one compared to this candidate, compared to this candidate. When it's like, no. Just look at who out there is sort of fighting for you and fighting for the way you see that you want the world and the country to function. You feel me? Rather than trying to play this own chess game amongst yourself or playing these mind games where you think that you have a better chance by pushing forward this person compared to another one.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why this election is going to be so interesting to watch play out, because it's like last time 95% of people thought they knew how it was going to play out, if not more than that, they were just so sure. And even the people who were like unsure weren't necessarily like Trump's going to win. They were just like, let's not be so sure that Trump's not going to win. You know what I'm saying? Whereas this time I feel like, people still have their predictions and on both sides and et cetera, but I feel like the level of uncertainty this time is just through the roof. Like, we really don't know how this is going to play out, and not even necessarily in terms of who's going to win or who's going to have the more votes, but it's like, how are votes actually going to get counted? How are, once votes are counted, are the results actually going to be accepted? Like, what is that? How long is this election actually going to last? Like all of these questions and nobody really understands, exactly how this is going to play out, because it is such an unprecedented election in the wake of the last unprecedented election. And so with that in mind, I think the way that it does play out is going to go, a long way in terms of how the political system is constructed moving forward, especially if, in my opinion, especially if Trump doesn't really win, but then accepts the win, and everyone's like, oh, all right, like, I guess we'll try again in 2024. Like, I feel like the negative repercussions of that are going to be through the roof.
Yeah.
But obviously there's a lot of other scenarios that could play out, and ultimately all of those are still going to go a long way in writing, what the next 4 years, but even beyond that, like really what the political future of America is going to look like.
What I hope to is just post November 3rd, I just hope that since we bring a lot of awareness to get people to go out there and vote, I hope the same level of awareness and same amount of marketing dollars, partnerships that are going out and happening. Like, I open up our Uber app and it tells me about registering and stuff to vote. You know what I'm saying? Where it was like, whoa, this was not a thing before, and I hope these same amount.
It's too much, man. I don't know if you saw the Kev on stage skit.
No, what he said.
I don't even know if it was a skit or if he was just like ranting, but he was just like, every single time I log into Instagram, it's just like, go register to vote. I'm already registered to vote. Like, leave me alone. Like, please. Like, you know what I'm saying? And there is definitely a subsection of people who are stubborn enough who are probably not going to vote because of the fact that everyone told them to vote.
It's pushing them to, yeah. But then also, too, what I'm thinking is, like, I appreciate the fact that all of this awareness is happening, and I just hope that the energy kept where it's like, once the election is finished, the marketing dollars are now going towards keeping people politically active, politically involved, letting them know, like, hey, granted there was a presidential election going on, but hey, there's other local elections happening. Are you going to vote for this? Are you going to vote for that? You know what I'm saying? And just making sure that people are just continuously engaged in it. Otherwise, it just seems like another not, I wouldn't say another campaign, but it just seems like it's just another function in which awareness was just brought just for one specific person, and then after that, it's like, all right, business as usual. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, as usual.
Yeah,
That's what
right.
it comes.
Policies as usual.
Yeah, well, I mean, really though, to bring it full circle, I think that is sort of like in all of these cases, it's like how are public entities or public people interacting with everyday people, and is that an authentic interaction, or is that something that's just being done for like marketing or propaganda or like political power? You know, like for all these other ulterior motives. Um,
So how
yeah,
can we keep the conversation going beyond the election? And of course, conversations like this are helpful. And I know that there's other people in our networks, in our circles, that are continuously bringing awareness of what's happening, not only in the world, but specifically to their community in order to garner attention, garner support for change. But it's just like it was similar to when we saw a lot of the social media activism that happened back in June, where people are like posting black squares and like people are sharing like black businesses, so on and so forth. And it's just like, haven't seen people in my network share some black businesses in some time. You know what I mean? It's just like black businesses were only opened up in June and July, and all of a sudden they just disappeared. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, I just hope people are just realizing that even though media would have you believe that, and it's very true that these issues are extremely important and pertinent what's happening right now in everyday life. I just hope that when the algorithm changes, people's hearts don't change as well. You know what I mean? Because we already know the attention and the focus is going to change after that regardless.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we just gotta hope that again, like there's just been so many moments where people's realities are getting reshaped, and like whether that's police brutality videos going viral, or people are like, oh, like I actually have to accept the fact that this is actually an issue that people go through, or whether it's elections or like the pandemic. Like there's just so many different things where it's like one would hope that after all these experiences, people are coming out on the other side more empathetic, more community minded, more concerned with progress, and more aware of what's actually going on. To your point, but I guess the jury's still out. Like we just got to take it a day at a time, conversation at a time, and see where it ends up.
Yep, nah, for sure. Well, Dan, that was good. Yeah, that's pretty much I got on media and awareness. You got any Sunday shout outs?
Man, I just want to shout out everyone who has hopped into this conversation and or is still in this conversation. I know there's a couple of y'all left at the moment, but yeah, we're really the purpose of this is really to. I mean, Eric summarized it great at the beginning that we're not coming in here with any agenda. Like, on my end, I feel like I'm not trying to give anyone the answers. I'm just asking questions and trying to like find the answers myself, and hopefully we can find the answers together.
Entirely.
So it's appreciate everybody who supported for this first one, and looking forward to continuing the conversation as well as continuing with our usual podcast conversations. Coming back in a few weeks as well. So shouts out to everyone who's been supporting and everyone who's stayed around for this conversation so far.
Yeah, no, I second that. My Sunday shout outs go out to all of you guys who have been supporting us and continuously do so. We support you in any way that you would like to be supported as well. Know that the support is free and the support is mutual. So definitely do appreciate it on that end. And yeah, just the second again, can you second the second that if someone was to second what I'm saying, can I then second you seconding what I was saying?
I think you're fourthing it.
Fourthing it. All right, so just to fourth it up, it's like we definitely just want to create a space where that is accessible to anyone. So for all of you guys, if you want to hop on at any given opportunity in order to come on live and speak with either Aazim, me, or somebody else in your network and utilize this platform as a place for you to host conversations, feel free to, because in the end of the day, we want to be able to give everyone and empower everyone with the same levels of tools, technology, and community that we've been so blessed with building by way of you guys. So always at any given time, definitely feel free to continuously join the conversation. And like you mentioned before, this is going to be happening every single Sunday, and things are happening every single week. So I'm pretty sure we're going to have things to talk about every single week whenever we do this. But again, Sundays at 12, when we got the podcast coming on Wednesdays. And just being able to just connect those dots in that way, I feel like is pretty powerful. It's a blessing, you know what I'm saying? Because with this tech, it's like we don't have to wait on the opportunity to get on like a CNN or a Fox News to sort of share and give our opinion on what's happening in the world. You know what I'm saying? Be able to talk with our peers or other thought leaders in society. It's like we have the tools at our disposal. It's like, are we going to utilize them or not for the greater good and to continuously keeping that conversation going?
Well said all around, man. I got nothing. I might have zoned out a little bit in the last couple sentences, but
So, I probably mostly forgot what I was saying 7 seconds ago, but the message is there. Also, too, we got a website coming soon. I don't want to spoil the name of it, but I think that once you guys figure out what the name of it is, I think a lot more things are going to start clicking to what exactly we're trying to do here over at You Free.
definitely, yeah. Look out for the replay if you hopped in, late in the conversation or you missed some of it. Look out for the replay both on IGTV. We'll also have it up on our YouTube channel pretty soon as well. And yeah, I mean, besides that, that's all I got on this Sunday.
That's all I got too. Thank you, everyone, again. Peace and blessings, all right?
Deuces.
Peace.